The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Encrypting Email with Office 365. We are excited to get started. I'm just going to give you a few pointers before we get going. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into that question box. I will get them called out and answered for you. The other thing is we will be recording this webinar. It will be up on our website by the end of the day. That's abc-computers.com. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Tim, and get started.
Well, thank you very much, Abby, for that welcome. And thank you, everybody, for attending our Encrypting Email with Office 365 webinar today. I am Tim Boss. I am the Infrastructure Support Manager here at ABC Computers. And I will be joined today by Chris Bartel. He is one of our network engineers also here with ABC Computers.
Oh. Yep, my name is Chris Bartle. I've been on with ABC Computers for about 12 years now. I was hired on as a network engineer. I've done everything from repair work on airplane de-icing machines to tracking packets to Mexico. And recently we've been doing more with Microsoft Navision as a Microsoft Gold partner and working with the Office 365 Azure tools. And it's been an exciting couple of years here.
It sure has. We are a growing organization. It has been a very exciting couple of years. So who is ABC Computers? We are an IT services firm and also a reseller and partner of Microsoft. We focus specifically on Microsoft Dynamics NAV, have been in business for over 30 years, and we just crested the 50 employee mark this year. So we're pretty excited about that. As we said, we have been growing quite rapidly, and there's been a lot of change and a lot of fun in the technology industry that we've been fortunate enough to be a part of. We do have 4 locations. We are in Rhinelander, over by La Crosse in Onalaska, in Wapaka, which is where I'm located here today, and then in South Bend, Indiana. We do have staff that work remotely. Almost 40% of our staff actually work remotely with us as well. So we count those as some of our satellite locations. Some of our clients that you might have heard of, we do work with Bulldog Battery and Culver's, also Saris and Chefs, pretty popular. You might have heard of Saris, like the bike racks and stuff like that for your cars. Personally, I owned one before I even knew they were a partner of ours. So,
Tim, I am going to interrupt you real quick. Chris, I'm going to ask you if Tim's presentation slides are changing for you because I'm still stuck on the first screen.
I'm still seeing the first screen as well, yes.
Okay. So, Tim, we aren't seeing your presentation slides change.
All right, bear with me just a moment. How about that? Are you guys seeing any difference there?
I am not seeing a slide change yet.
Not on mine. There, it's resetting. Now I can see it.
There we go. That did it.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. All right. So this was the slide I was just on, just showing our locations. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump ahead here. And just make sure that that slide actually changed as well. You guys are okay to see that?
Looks great.
Yes, it looks good.
All right. Thank you for pointing that out, Abby. We appreciate that. All right. So meeting the experts. Like I said, I am Tim Boss. I am the Infrastructure Support Manager here at ABC Computers. I've been with the company for 4 years. We actually specialize in providing the support and services around our infrastructure practice that is focused primarily on Microsoft Dynamics NAV customers and their infrastructure. Deploying and managing that infrastructure, as well as designing and implementing, as well. Chris?
Yep, I've been with the company 12 years and about 22 years of background experience.
All right. Okay, so we're going to jump into the Microsoft Office 365 encrypting email with 365. So encrypting email with Office 365 is a service that Microsoft released earlier this year. It is a pretty good service from what we found so far in our testing and our setup. It does work very well. It's easy to use. It's also easy to configure, which is a good draw towards it, and it's very inexpensive to have set up for your organization. So we're going to jump into some of the details of setting that up and what's required. As you get into the setup, there is some additional licensing that is required. So if you're already an Office 365 subscriber and you're using the Exchange Online plan or an E3 plan for your users, then you are still going to be required to add the Azure Rights Management for all your users. That is a $2 per user per month add-on that you will have to add. There are licenses that are there, but they don't have to be assigned. You just have to purchase to cover the amount of users that you have. If you're using an internal Exchange server, then you're also going to have to add the license for Exchange Online Protection. That's going to be in addition to the Azure Rights Management for all of the users. So your total cost then is going to be $3 per user per month. And that will allow you then to have the services set up to filter your email through the Office 365 encryption service. One thing worth mentioning here is that if you do have an Exchange Online plan, then there is going to be a little bit of additional setup that you are going to need to do, and you're going to have to configure just some transport rules internally in your Exchange server. So still not overly complex and fairly easy to do, but it's just the extra step that you'll have to take if you're on-prem. So we're going to talk a little bit about the flow here, just to kind of give you a little introduction as to what it looks like to send encrypted email through Office 365. So the mail flow is going to be originated from somebody within the organization, and it's going to be filtered based off of either keyword search, formatting of words. There's a variety of different filters that you can set up and use that will trigger the encryption for Office 365. What's going to happen is you're going to go ahead and send the email then, and then as soon as it goes through and passes through the Exchange server, it's going to pick up on the keywords or whatever rules you have in place, and then it's going to pass it over and encrypt the message. The message is then going to be delivered to the recipient directly to their inbox, but it's going to be delivered as just a blank message with an HTML attachment. The recipient will then have to open that attachment and then connect to the viewing portal. At this point, they're going to have to authenticate, and they will be authenticating with either their Windows Live ID. If they are using a Microsoft Office 365 subscription, then they can use their 365. Otherwise, there is a bypass or a one-time option that you can use as well that Microsoft provides for this. Once they've entered that information in, then they will go ahead and be able to read the email. It'll show up in the web portal that way. It does not download the content of the email to your inbox. It's only available to be viewed after you have authenticated. So if tomorrow morning I want to go ahead and reread that email, I'm going to have to go back into Outlook. I'm going to have to open up that HTML attachment, reconnect, and then re-authenticate again to read the content of the email that was sent. So let's take a look at the setup of the encryption services and what it looks like. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. Let's take a look at what it looks like to have the licensing set up in Office 365.
Correct. So if you want to hit play on the demo here, basically you're going to log into the Office 365 portal, and you're going to find the administration section of it. When you go into there, you'll have a bunch of categories that you'll see on the left side of the screen, and one of them will be your subscriptions and billing and all that sort of thing. You're going to go to the subscription category, and you're going to add a license or a trial or the full license, up to you. And once you've added the Microsoft Azure Rights Management license and enough licenses to cover your total contract for your 365 subscription, you're ready to go. Notice here we do have unassigned licenses, but the number of valid licenses have to cover the number of users and the total contract.
Right, and thanks, Chris. And that's exactly what I was just saying there with the licenses themselves. You don't have to actually configure the licenses for the specific users. So it actually keeps it a little bit more simple that way, just because after implementing this, you don't have to touch every user account or run some additional PowerShell commands to assign those licenses. So let's take a look at the setup of the encryption services. And yes, it does require a little bit of PowerShell use. So what we're going to do here is we're going to give you a little bit of a background on the commands that we need to run. So it's actually very few commands that we have to use in order to get set up for the encryption services. What you have to do is you have to enable the IRM or activate the IRM, which is going to allow you to use the particular service. The only way that you can perform this action is through PowerShell. So if any of you have used PowerShell to connect to your Office 365 environment before, then you are familiar with what that process looks like. We will show you on the next slide what that does look like and what commands you do have to run just for reference. But for more information, I would refer you back to Microsoft just to gather the requirements for making the connections and such. But once we get connected to the Office 365 environment, you're going to go ahead and just run these series of commands. The RMS online sharing key, and then walking through, that's on step 3. That's basically going to enable and activate the service, but then you're also going to select the specific region in which you reside. Once you get through that piece of it, you're going to set the IRM configuration for the internal licensing. You'll see that in step just after step 6 there. And once you've completed those few steps and it runs in the background, everything's going to complete. Once that's successful, you can go ahead and disconnect from PowerShell, and all the PowerShell commandlets at that point are completed. You're not going to be configuring the rules and things like that through PowerShell, at least for the sake of this demonstration. So we did want to mention here that there is a specific error message that you can get or that you might see. So if you do receive the error message here that we have listed in red, and it's very specific, it basically just means that when you ran your PowerShell commandlets, it didn't take. Something failed and it didn't actually activate the particular services needed to complete that process. And so you're going to have to go back then and just rerun the commands, reconnect, make sure everything takes, and that it completes successfully, and then go ahead and come back out and try to create your rules. From what we've learned, what our experiences are with the particular service, after running the PowerShell commandlets and everything completing successfully, and we've found no delay in actually being able to configure the rules. So if you're experiencing some kind of error, and you know, it's most likely not due to having to wait, you know, 10 or 15 minutes for the actual configuration change to take effect. So I would just immediately review the PowerShell and make sure that's all functioning, and then you should be okay. So we're going to take a quick look at the starting a session. I had mentioned this before. Just for those of you who haven't connected to PowerShell to your Office 365 environment, this is just a quick rundown of the commands themselves, and then a reference to the website from Microsoft where you can find a little more information about this. So once you get in there, this is just a little more cleaned up view. We wanted to show everybody exactly what it looks like to run the specific commands instead of the a little more cluttered view that we had there with all the detail. Once you are connected to Office 365, it's surprisingly simple to configure and run the commands. It's only 3 additional commands beyond the connection point, and you'll see them here in the bullet points. Aside from the closing your PowerShell session, which would be your 4th command. Once that's completed, you're going to be all set. The service is going to be activated, and you're going to be ready to configure. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like.
Right, so basically you get to a PowerShell command on your Windows machine. You're going to have to execute a command to allow it to execute these remote sign scripts and such. If you haven't done this before, it's a one-time thing. Then you go ahead and you enter your credentials and you authenticate to the system. And once it's accepted that, then you're allowed to bring that session in and import all the information it needs so you can execute your commands. So it's pretty straightforward. You just do a copy and paste of the commands as we had them laid out there. It's not really all that hard. Just have to know your name and password. That's all the additional data you need. And you can see here now it links to the system. It brings down all the information it needs from your portal. And at this point, you're ready to go. This is where you would insert the command to tell it which geographical area you're in. And once you've done that, the important thing is to make sure you then close out your session, and you're done.
And that's it. And it's worth mentioning here that everything above the yellow output that you saw in PowerShell was just the connection to the session itself. So the commands to run were, like we said, just those 3. And once those were done, we removed the session and disconnect them. So let's jump into the actual rules and the setup of the rules. So for this webinar, the demonstration, what we're going to use is we're actually going to use a keyword search or a keyword to invoke the encryption rule. Okay, you can use a variety of different methods to invoke the encryption. User opens that and decrypts the message and reads it, they can reply to that message. And when they reply to that message, that's also going to encrypt the reply. So if you're passing data back and forth between people, for us specifically, we tend to use it a lot for passwords and account information with some of our customers. So we'll go ahead and change some passwords, and we'll send that to then their IT department or whoever the contact is as an encrypted email that way. Then when they reply back and say thanks, it also comes back encrypted just to make sure the data in the body of the email and stuff is still protected. So to get past that, if you were doing a reply, in some instances, myself specifically have gotten into a conversation with somebody after passing through some sensitive information. The email originated as encrypted, and so once I got it back as encrypted, I just removed the sensitive data out of the bottom of the email from the original email and just took the word secured out of the subject line and then just went ahead and replied back normally to them so that they receive the email as not encrypted, and you don't have this 8 to 10 email chain of encrypted messages going back and forth. So. All right, so we mentioned before about using social security numbers and credit cards. So Microsoft also offers a feature that gets a little bit more in depth, and that's going to allow you to be a little bit more on the compliance side of things with HIPAA and SAS 70 and PCI, et cetera, et cetera. Microsoft, we've worked directly with Microsoft on some of the setup with the email encryption itself. Microsoft was able to confirm with us that if you are to use the rules like we're about to show you to filter credit cards or social security numbers, after hours of painstaking support, they finally came back and told us that they're not exactly the best way to do it when you're going to do a credit card number. For that specific scenario, they would recommend using the compliance management or the data loss prevention rules. So that's not something that we're going to cover in this particular webinar, but it is something that we're going to cover in a future webinar. We're going to go a little more in depth into that compliance management and data loss prevention just to get more details on the credit card and social security number filtering. As a side note to that, what we were finding in our testing is that it was very sporadic whether or not it would actually filter and encrypt the message based off of the criteria that we had set in the rules for the social security number and or the credit card. Mainly the credit card, particularly the credit card, would fail almost every time. So I just wanted to mention that. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
But we've had no issues with the keyword subject rule. This has worked very reliably.
Yes, that is correct. Yep, that has worked very, very well for us. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a moment here and walk through the rule configuration and setup. So you're going to sign into your Office 365 again now. This is after we've run our PowerShell commands. You're going to go back over to the admin section, and you're going to open up Exchange Online. And that's going to be in the left-hand side there all the way to the bottom. Underneath of the mail flow section, you're going to find rules. There's a little link to rules. We're going to go ahead and open that up. This is where we're going to go and configure all of the rules that we want. We're going to make sure we're selected on rules up at the top, and we're going to go create a new rule. You can put a name in for this rule here, whatever makes sense for your organization. And then you're going to apply this rule if. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot of different options here. We're going to choose the subject matches, and this is going to be keywords and phrases. And we're going to go ahead and put the word secured in here. And we have to add that over there on the right, and then click OK. And then we have to give it a condition. So once we've done that, you're going to notice that there's not a lot of options in here. So down at the bottom of the window, you see there's a More Options link. You're going to have to select that. Once you've done that, go ahead and select Do the Following. And now you'll see we've got some additional menu options as well as some pop-out menus that we can select from. And we're going to go to Modify the Message Security and apply the Office 365 message encryption. And if you take a look at this, we're going to apply it if the body contains the word secured. We're also going to go ahead and set the rule to a severity level of medium. That was a recommendation by Microsoft. They didn't really have a specific reason for us doing that in this rule. We found that it worked either way, whether it was on medium or not. So we set it to medium just because they recommended it. But then you can just leave the time and stuff unselected because we want the rule to apply all the time in this case. And then we're going to go ahead and save and close that rule. And you'll notice that that is it. The rule has been created. So the rule setup is very, very simple. It's very straightforward. Again, you'll notice in there are a lot of options, so there's a lot of different stuff that you can play with and that you can do. You can even select it, if it's a specific sender or recipient is outside of the organization or inside of the organization. So there's a lot of different possibilities there. I recommend reviewing them and find out what makes sense for you. All right, so to start a secured conversation in this particular instance, all we're looking for is the word secured, okay? So we're going to go ahead and just walk through what it looks like here to receive the email once we've sent a secured email. So just rewinding a bit, essentially this is just an email, and you'll notice that it just has secured in the subject line. Here is the secured information that you request. And that's it. That triggered our filter. That actually received the message here, just like we see here in Outlook. Okay? You can see the attached HTML document there on the message itself. So we're going to go ahead and walk through what that looks like to open and view that message as we discussed. So once you receive that, you can open up the message. And you're going to double click on the HTML, open that up. Chris had a good point here on this, and that's that if you just preview the message, there are times where that will fail. It's kind of a little bit of a gotcha. We recommend just double-clicking on it and opening it up completely. Because otherwise you'll get this.
So this is a great example where you have to right-click on the message and open it independent. If you double-click, Outlook tries to protect you from whatever the HTML file is. So that can be a little bit of a gotcha if you haven't caught that before. But then it kicks off the browser for you.
And once the browser is launched, you're going to get that sign in or authenticate. You're going to pick whichever one makes the most sense for you. So in our case, it's going to be a Microsoft account for the demo here.
So the organizational account would be if you have an Office 365 account, and the Microsoft account would be if you're an outside user or something like that and you have a live account to use with the system. Then you go ahead and sign in. It's kind of nice that the client management is independent of you. So if I'm the receiver, that authentication process is my task to deal with. You don't have to do password resets or anything for the client. They take care of that on their own, just with their own email address. And now you can see here that you can see the new email with the contents with the secret password, as it were.
And notice, as we mentioned before, it does not download the message to your inbox. So just authenticating it doesn't put it in plain text in your inbox. You still are going to have to re-authenticate and open the HTML if you want to view it again at a later time.
But you can reply through this portal and keep the conversation going. So.
That is correct. All right, so we're going to go ahead and
I think what we're looking at here is the OWA portal side of things, that you could do pretty much the exact same thing. If the person wasn't using Outlook, you could also just go to the portal, log in with your account. Again, you'll see the attachment, and right-click and download the attachment or open the attachment, just like you would in Outlook.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Chris. So you might ask yourself, with the encryption itself, what do I do if I receive it on my phone? Most people are carrying their phone all the time, and the possibility of viewing these messages or receiving these messages while traveling is very real. The great thing is with Microsoft is they have provided a cross-platform type support for this, and so you can view the message on a Windows phone, Android, or an iPhone device. Tablets as well. It's going to behave the same way. So we're going to go ahead and walk through a little bit of a demo of what it looks like to receive the message on your mobile device. And just to set this up a little bit, I believe this is going to be done initially on an Android device for you. All right, so you can see that there in the message, we received the message. It's the same type of thing with the attachment. See the attachment there? We're going to just go ahead and open that up and download it.
Yeah, this is the iPhone example, and the iPhone requires the OpenOME viewer. It's a little app you have to install on the iPhone, and you send the HTML file to that app. You don't have to do that with the other phones, just with the iPhone.
Great, Chris. Thank you for backing me up there on the platform we're using here.
At that point, it basically kicks up the app, allows you to get your passcode and get into the system. So you click the link for Get Passcode. That now sends an email over to your phone's standard email account, at which point you would jump back over to the email program. You would open the email that came in with the code and then just hold and select on it in order to copy the number. Now you can jump back over to the other app and hold and paste that code in there. Now you can continue, authenticate to the portal. And there's the encrypted message with the contents. And again, from here you could reply to it and all that. Keep the conversation going if you need to.
Perfect.
Jump to the next video. I believe that'll have the Android.
All right, so we'll walk through the Android setup as well. So here you'll see you're going to select the HTML and then click the little download. This is very standard for Android devices. And you're going to notice from here it's a very similar experience. And just like that, you'll see that the message is there. Again, with the Android devices and with the Windows Phone, it is a little bit less, a little bit less to actually open the message, which I find very convenient as a non-iPhone user. But it is just, it is very simple, even on an iPhone or an Apple device, to be able to view the same messages. So then you can go ahead and reply back to that same message. And again, as we mentioned before, it is going to be returned back to the sender as an encrypted message again, just to make sure that the credit card information that is in there, or whatever in this particular case, is still encrypted in the reply.
So some of the gotchas we had run into previously working with this sort of thing was you saw in Outlook where you had to open the attachment in a particular way. You couldn't preview the message. You had to actually open the message, otherwise it would try and protect you. We've had similar issues with third-party clients where somebody was using a really old version of Thunderbird, I believe, and for whatever reason we couldn't get that to work. So you might have something like that with third-party clients on the outside of somebody using fairly old versions, upwards of 3 or 4 year old types of software. Someone types the keyword by accident, obviously, so picking a word that isn't necessarily going to come up in conversation, kind of a good idea. And if implementing such as social security numbers or credit cards, I'd really recommend making sure your staff understands how to use the tool well before you start implementing rules like that. Otherwise, things can get stressed where they're getting asked, how do I do this, and they've not worked with it before. So.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, with the credit card and the social security numbers, we would advise at this point, until Microsoft has something changed, that you not use the rules specifically to what we've explained in this webinar. They do have templates, essentially templates that you can select from within the rule configuration that cover credit card information or U.S. social security numbers. Those were the ones that we were finding specifically were sporadic at best, and in some cases with the credit card, almost not working. 1 or 2 times, we had seen it work, and but it was very inconsistent. And so we would recommend using the compliance management if you're going to be doing that now and looking into that and digging into setting that up as well. So we will, like I said, be providing a second webinar on more detailed information on setting that up. At a different time, at a later time.
So one of the things we were talking about too is how is this different than using other solutions? I've worked with other solutions where you have to install a third-party application, such as a toolbar for Outlook, and then basically the messages go out through a different mail server and get encrypted on their end. This doesn't require anything extra. It's rather nice that you can simply use it with your existing Outlook, your existing phones. It doesn't require anything extra to work, as you've seen, in order to invoke it. Sometimes in order to read, but other than that. Your staff doesn't have to manage the recipient accounts, as I mentioned earlier. You don't have to worry about what the password is for the recipient, and if there is a problem with it, they have the ability to send themselves a password reset on their own. Not necessarily your problem, so to speak. Conversation must be initiated from your internal staff. So again, like Tim mentioned earlier, it can't be invoked by accident from somebody sending into your organization with a word or phrase or something like that that they weren't expecting.
And again, just to reiterate, with the internal exchange or for the on-prem exchange environments, it works exactly the same. So the additional configuration is going to be setting up and adding a transport rule to your exchange environment. But once that's in place and you've gone through the setup that we configured through the 365 portal, then you will be able to go ahead and send based off of the keyword search and manage your rules from within the portal itself.
Correct.
So that concludes our discussion today on the email encryption for Office 365. I guess we'll open it up to any questions that we have.
Great. So just a reminder to all of our attendees, you can type your questions into the question box. I will call them out and get them answered for you. Our first question here, guys, does the service require a license for every user in my organization?
Yes, it does. It requires a license to cover every particular user. But as we mentioned before, you don't have to assign that license to each user. So it's just something that you have to purchase and have there, and have the quantity to cover everybody in the company.
Great. Our next question, do external recipients require subscriptions?
No, they don't. That's a free account that they create when they receive the email. And again, they manage that account on their own. But it's not a subscription per se. They can just create a free Microsoft account and assign their own password.
That is correct. And there's one thing on here that we didn't actually cover, and you sort of saw that with the Windows. I'm sorry, with the Apple, with the iPhone, how there was the one-time type passcode that you could put in there. So there is a bypass. If you don't have a Windows Live ID and you receive one of the messages, and you don't want to go out to Microsoft and create a Live ID just so you can read an email, they do offer a link in there for you to get a one-time passcode then emailed back to you that you can walk through a very similar process that you would walk through if you were using an iPhone. So yes, they can have an account that way, but if they don't, Microsoft does give you a way to access the email content without that.
Okay, great. Our next question, how many recipients can I send an Office 365 encrypted message to?
The recipient is going to be standard with Exchange. I actually don't have the number, exact number right now, but there are no constraints. So if you're sending a message, I've had as many as 12 or 14 people at least copied into a message. You could certainly have more than that. There's not going to be a limitation as far as the encryption is considered.
No, but it's interesting. It's really more of a limitation of the to field. The last document I saw refers to something like 10,000 characters. So it's not necessarily a count. It's more a matter of the length of the string on the to subject line, or on the to fields.
Okay. Our next question that I think you touched on briefly, but maybe we could expound on a little bit, are replies and forwarded messages encrypted?
Yes, they would be. So a great example of that is just yesterday, one of our directors had me how come he had sent an encrypted message to our CEO. And the message was just a forward. Okay, so it was a forward of some billing information, and when the vendor sent it, they actually had in the description the word secured was in that particular description. And so he received the message, and it was unencrypted, and there wasn't data in there that needed to be encrypted. But then once he took that message and he forwarded it on to our CEO internally, then that invoked that rule to encrypt the message, and then our CEO then received the encrypted message. So forward then replies are going to be encrypted, and that's going to be no matter what. It's not going to maintain its encryption, though, if you forward. And I guess, Chris, maybe you should jump in here, but if you were, say, the recipient at your Outlook.com and then you forward it to a personal email address, then the encryption there as far as retention I believe, is going to still encrypt the message and have you authenticate once you open it.
That's interesting. If you were replying to the person in question and you CC'd somebody else, the other person would receive the encrypted email link and they would have to authenticate to read it, yes.
Okay, great. Our next question, are Office 365 encrypted messages stored in the cloud or on Microsoft servers?
Interesting. They're actually stored on your server, as I understand it. The portal is more of a viewing portal, and it doesn't go to the recipient per se, but you're basically punching a hole into the portal to read the encrypted message from the secure Exchange server.
Okay. Can I customize encrypted email messages with my brand?
PowerShell. Yes, you can. But in order to do that, you do have to use a PowerShell commandlet in order to put branding on the initial message that comes through. I have done it where I've included, I've actually attached something to the end of the encrypted message so that when they open it through the secure portal, there could be a line in the body of the message. It is possible to actually brand the initial message, but again, that has to be done with PowerShell.
Okay. I am using Exchange 2013. Will Office 365 message encryption be made available to me?
Yes.
Yes.
And in fact, as we mentioned earlier, we've done on-premise Exchange integration. I've personally used it with an Exchange 2007 server to create the transport rules back. So again, from an on-prem Exchange server sending out through Microsoft, yes, you can actually easily take advantage of those rules. You just got to create that secure link from your location to theirs.
Okay. Sounds like kind of a follow-up on that. Do I need to open any URLs, IP addresses, or ports in my organization's firewall to support Office 365 message encryption?
I would say no, other than the user has to be able to get to the portal to read it. So if the website, let's say I'm at my Rhinelander location and I'm trying to read a secure email and I have my router locked down, I would need access to the secure email servers to read that message, obviously. And there is a list of IP addresses you can use to allow the users out to those sites.
Okay. Our next question, how is Office 365 message encryption different than rights management services?
Rights management services is a different back-end engine. It has far more capabilities than just simple transport rules. So it can look inside of the body of it. It can apply things like document expiration and some of these really new advanced features. Much more robust system, I guess I would say. But simple encryption is what we're talking about today is just the ability to invoke the web portal for encryption and make sure the data is secure from you to there. Whereas the other services can do much more, let's say internal document management. If a message was going from myself to another employee, and it could apply an expiration to the doc file so that it wouldn't exist outside the organization.
Yeah, and that is something that we are going to be touching on in a future webinar here this summer, because that was a lot of questions came up for us specifically in putting the content together for this around the rights management and the differences between the two, and then with Microsoft's comment of the credit cards and how we should be using it that way as opposed to using the rules that they have in there to invoke the credit card number encryption and social security numbers. It really kind of drove us to want to dig more on that and actually learn more and present that, because it seems to be a topic that we weren't as familiar with once it was brought up, and we want to be able to share that with all of you.
Our next question, what encryption method is used for Office 365 message encryption?
Cryptographic method mode 2, I believe, is what's used. It's a 248-bit encryption services. SHA-256, I believe, is what they refer to it as.
All right, short and sweet. Our next question, what if you have an additional email account set up in your Outlook or MSO 365? Will that work the same, or will it ignore it if it goes through a different email service?
If it's going through a different email service, then you would not hit the Exchange transport on the outside, so the rules would not be invoked. So it's a matter of where you're sending through, not necessarily what software you're using on your own. Does that answer that question?
I think so. Our next question, my users send encrypted email messages to recipients outside of our organization. Is there anything that external recipients have to do in order to read and reply to email messages that are encrypted with Office 365 message encryption?
There's nothing that they have to do to prepare to receive the messages, but once they do receive the messages, that would be that HTML document that they would have to click on and open, and then they would have to do the authentication piece of that. So whether that's signing in with their Windows Live ID, if they do have a Office 365 or they're already running Exchange, they can use their organizational account for that. or they can use the one-time option where they would receive a passcode and then they can type that in and then view the message. But no preparation in advance. They don't have to prepare their environments or do anything like that to receive the message.
Okay, our next question, is there a trial version of Office 365 encryption available?
Absolutely. Yes, you can. When you're adding the license during the first phase, you can either just subscribe to the license immediately, or the subscription, or you could. There's a link there for adding the trial to your account. I believe it's a 30-day trial, which you could then turn into a full contract if you wish.
Okay, this is kind of a follow-up on that. So how can I purchase the Office 365 message encryption?
You can add the licensing for the message encryption just through the portal underneath the subscriptions section. The same way you would add licenses to your already existing subscription if you had an E1 or an E3 or whatever plan you're using. If you don't have Microsoft Office 365 at all at this point, you would have to go out and create an account for Office 365 and get all of that set up. There is a process to that. You'll have to confirm then your domain that you're using, your ownership of that domain, so that way you can activate that specific account. Once you have that done, then you can go ahead and add your licenses in underneath the subscription section and your particular needs. If you need the Azure Rights Management, you can add all that there.
Okay, our next question. If you do purchase it, is it by month for the Azure portion? Can you cancel it at any time? And are there penalties? Because we already have Office 365.
It is a month-to-month, so the subscription for that is month-to-month. It is $2 per user per month if you are already on Office 365. There is no long-term contract, just like with the Office 365 user licenses, as you're probably already familiar with. So you can add it for the month if you choose, or like Chris said, you could actually add the trial version for 30 days. But once you do have the full-blown licenses, you can certainly drop those and cancel, just like you can with your current, Exchange licenses for your users.
Okay.
I have to wonder though if I think you could also sign up to a yearly subscription if you wish to, and I don't believe that would be refundable, but you would get a lower rate in some instances. I haven't personally tried to subscribe to a encryption service at the discounted rate, but I did note, like for other clients when we were setting up small business plans and things of that nature, there is a yearly fee which is like $1 less per month per account, and when you set that up, it is important to watch to see if it says yearly or monthly. So I would keep an eye out when you're signing up, but I don't believe they have that option for the encryption.
Okay, our next question. I am using Exchange 2013. Will the Office 365 message encryption be available to me?
Yeah, I believe we answered that one. The answer is yes, it will be available to you. It's the same type of setup. So again, you just have to configure the transport rules within your environment once you've got the Office 365 environment set up, and then it'll work the exact same way as if you're using Exchange through Office 365.
Maybe this is a question regarding more of the user account. Yeah, when you do create the transport rules at the last site we set up, we also did set up the Active Directory sync, or the dir sync functionality. Basically, that means that the accounts on the local system were replicated to the 365 account, at which point the accounts exist, the passwords are there, didn't require any user interaction per se to make this work. We just had to initiate the secure word, and everything started flowing as expected.
Yes, and in that particular environment, the end users wouldn't even know that the Office 365 environment exists. I mean, we're not going to give them login access to the portal just because there's no need for it or anything like that. And you're not using it, in that case, to manage email, just for the Active Directory sync and for the filtering services.
That's correct.
Okay. How is Office 365 encryption different than, and you guys are going to have to forgive me because I don't know how to say this acronym exactly, S/MIME?
Chris, do you have a
Well, I think what they're referring to there is more of a protocol question. I would argue it's quite different. With MIME type connectivity encryption there, you're talking about encryption from the client to the host, but this gets into the communication from server to server, right? Because when we send out emails, normally there's no guarantee that the encryption going, or that the message going from my Exchange server to another person's geographic location is going to be encrypted. This ensures that the person on the other end does in fact have a secure portal to that message. So again, that is more of a question of what client am I using versus a service to take care of that server-to-server communication. Does that help?
Okay, great. Our next question, does Office 365 message encryption provide localization?
I guess I'm not sure how to answer that one. Referring to how the question's meaning. We'll have to get back to the person on that one.
Okay. Here's one. I am an Exchange host encryption subscriber. Does Office 365 message encryption apply to me? And where, like, can I learn more about it?
Everybody has been upgraded to the new version of message encryption. I think what they're referring to is the old version of message encryption that was out there, and that structure has been upgraded. So basically, if you have the previous version of encryption services, it had a different label going back a year and a half ago. They then migrated that into a new engine, and basically you just got grandfathered into the new service. So I suspect you're already using the same system that we're talking about today.
Okay, our next question. So if you open a message that was encrypted through your phone, is there any security risk when using public Wi-Fi?
I would say no, again, because the service that we're talking about is going to give the end user a secure portal in which to read the data from. So, but your communication then would be going from your phone over the Wi-Fi or cellular connection, but that communication would be in an encrypted form, so it's secure.
Okay, and our next question, is it possible to revoke a message sent to a particular recipient? And can I view a report of encrypted messages that have been received and read?
No, you can't recall a message like you could do in normal Outlook. This is, once it goes to the encrypted portal, it's there. So once it's sent, you can't recall it. And the other question was, can I view a report of encrypted messages?
So one of the things you can do as far as a reporting is concerned, there are some options available in the rule setup and configuration that will allow you to have certain emails sent or be reported on every time an encrypted message is sent. Is there a central location to go view a report, or can we get a full report of what's all been encrypted? I guess I'm not 100% sure on the answer to that one.
I don't believe so, no. Aside from what you could do with the message rules to do something of that nature. Yeah.
Okay, great. We had quite a few questions today. That's the end of the list I have at the moment. If anybody has any last questions, go ahead and type them into that question box. While we are giving people a minute to do that, I do want to just remind everyone that we do record this and all of our webinars. So the recording will be up later today on our website. That is abc-computers.com. And guys, I don't see any further questions. If there's any final thoughts you had, you can share them now.
I just want to thank everybody for attending. We appreciate all the additional questions, and we look forward to hopefully all of your attendance again when we review the rights management and a little more in-depth deep dive into the message encryption.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at our next webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.